I thought you was dead.
Half.
First things first, the entire Absolute Universe, or Earth Alpha, is seriously wicked, and let's just say the heroes are cooked. And the reason behind it is that this Earth actually houses something called the Darkseid Energy. I'll explain it in detail later in the video, but for now let me tell you that it makes the bad guys much worse, and hope seems distant. Naturally, the Absolute Two-Face is not an exception to this rule. He seems to be his coldest and sickest version, someone who is bound to give Harvey a bad time. But you know what? This time around, even his backstory is extremely tragic. Like, he had no hand in becoming who he became. In fact, his only crime was being friends with Bruce Wayne. And Absolute Bane pretty much uses him to get to Bruce. There's just so much I have to tell you about this version of Harvey Dent, so I won't be extending the intro a lot. Let's cut to the chase and explore the 10 most important things we know about Absolute Two-Face. Childhood friends with Bruce, who wanted him arrested. There aren't very many people who are in on Bruce Wayne's secret, the fact that he's Batman. Bruce has kept his secret identity hidden from most of his friends and family, primarily because he wants to protect the ones he loves from his enemies. Now, in the main DC universe, Harvey Dent and Bruce Wayne initially met because of, well, let's just say professional reasons. However, that's not really the case in the Absolute Universe. So Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent from the Absolute Universe were actually good friends, childhood friends, before they became who they became, before they chose lives that encircled around crime. While one fought crime, the other embraced it. Another thing that's unique to the Absolute Universe is that Bruce does not have the old money or the generational wealth left behind for him by his father, Thomas Wayne. And here, Thomas was a school teacher and had a humble financial background. This also defined quite a few things about Bruce and the circle he hung around in. In fact, people like Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin, Edward Nygma, aka the Riddler, Waylon Jones, aka Killer Croc, Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman. All these people went to school with Bruce, where Thomas taught. But there was one more kid that Bruce was friends with. Yep, Harvey Dent, who would later become Two-Face. As for the neighborhood they lived in, it was notoriously called Crime Alley. If that rings a bell, it is because Crime Alley was the same place where Thomas and Martha were killed in the main universe by Joe Chill. The kids were so close that they would often have sleepovers, etc., and that friendship grew stronger as time passed. However, the death of Thomas Wayne at the Gotham Zoo was a big blow to everyone, especially Bruce, who blamed himself for his father's death. And on that fateful day, Harvey was also a part of the trip to the zoo. After graduating from college, Harvey and Bruce worked as interns at the city hall, and while Harvey went on to become a prosecutor at the district attorney's office, Bruce did not find law to be his thing, and he became a construction worker instead. And of course, Bruce moonlighted as a certain masked vigilante at night. One thing you need to note here is that the Absolute Batman did not have the resources of his other versions, so he needed to depend on others for information. And even though Harvey did not know it, Bruce used him to get information on Gotham's law enforcement and how it worked, which he then used in his Batman activities. And Harvey would divulge secrets and everything he knew, assuming he was just chit-chatting with a friend. But one thing led to another, and Bruce was forced to reveal his secret identity to his friends. Actually, he was grievously hurt by Black Mask, the first major villain of the Absolute Batman saga, and he had to go to Waylon for help. After the friends learned this secret, they all reacted differently, and as far as Harvey is concerned, well, he wanted his friend arrested for vigilantism and taking matters into his own hands. So yeah, Harvey Dent was a total man of the law until he wasn't. His story is tied to the Absolute Universe's working class Gotham. As I mentioned earlier, both Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent came from Crime Alley. That alone tells you just how humble their financial backgrounds were. What I mean to say is that they belonged to the working class of Gotham, not the upper middle class kind. These people had to live in a place that was literally named after crime. It can be considered the worst form of Gotham's underbelly. Naturally, Harvey Dent was not a suave and polished unhinged attorney at law. As is usually the case with his other versions and portrayals, this time around, Harvey had a more tragic and rather relatable background. Coming from such a crime-ridden atmosphere has made this Harvey Dent a common citizen who had to chart his way out with much difficulty. For instance, take the absolute Oswald or Bruce. Both of these guys worked at petty criminals initially. While Bruce managed to turn his way around, Oswald never could, but Harvey was different. He used his hours to study law and went on to work at the DA's office. Unfortunately, that could not last long because Bane became the direct cause of Dent's dent, both psychologically and physically. Before I get to just how Bane was responsible for Harvey Dent's fall from grace, I must give you a bit of background about Bane himself. You see, Bane had become Joker's lead enforcer, someone who conducted assassinations and carried out acts of terrorism globally, all for Joker's interests and profits. Oh yeah, Joker in Absolute Batman is like filthy rich and equally influential. Anyway, before serving Joker, Bane was actually a part of a rebel group called Cielos Libres, which was led by his father. Cielos Libres' objective was to free their island nation of Santa Prisca from outside forces that continually attacked and colonized the country for its abundant natural resources. However, they could never succeed, and ultimately Joker offered Bane an offer he could not refuse. He could ensure Santa Prisca's freedom, and in return, Bane would serve Joker. Now, Bane's plan was to make the same offer to Bruce, vis-a-vis Gotham, but Bruce would not accept such terms no matter how prosperous Gotham became, because he would never submit to a criminal. Bane knew that the only way to get Bruce to accept the offer was through breaking him, but he also knew that Batman's will is stronger than Darkseid's entire army. So how do you break such a man? Well, you do that by breaking the people that man loves the most, by breaking the people that man cares for the most, and that's where Harvey Dent came in. He was one of Bruce's closest buddies, and Bane targeted him. He ambushed Harvey along with Oswald and Enigma and began the process of turning them into their evil versions. The real extent of what Bane did to Harvey is revealed in the 12th issue of the comic. So Bane ambushes Harvey, and the prosecutor uses a bottle of rum as a weapon against the mighty Bane. But of course, that does not help in any manner whatsoever. Bane then goes on to crush Harvey's skull from the middle. So much so that when the cops found him, Harvey's skull was practically split in two. The bottle of rum that had smashed on the floor spilled its contents, and the broken Harvey fell on it. And while Bane did all this, he also spoke to Harvey, crushing his psyche too. He tells Dent how he always tried to serve as the group's big brother, its protector, and yet he was also destined to be the traitor because his friends were all outlaws, and despite his principles and ambitions, he established this ritual of the poker game, which was a safe place where the stakes were void, where Dent could be both forever outlaw and lawman, friend and enemy. And then Bane picks up one of the poker chips and puts one side on fire before throwing it at the spilled rum where Harvey's broken head rested. The man could not move much but managed to grab the burning poker chip before it could light up the alcohol. However, Bane then threw a burning matchstick, which did the trick, and half of his face burned severely. I'm talking 3rd and 4th degree burns, and the fire that engulfed Harvey cleansed him of all the sanity he had left in him. In fact, this attack is what served as a catalyst that broke Harvey, the final push that made him Two-Face. And even though Bruce was not the immediate cause of Harvey's fate, Harvey blames Bruce for his condition. When Bruce goes to visit him at the hospital, Harvey speaks about a memory from their childhood. He asks Bruce if he remembers Flash, the truant cop who was always one step ahead, no matter how stealthy they tried to be. Bruce says he remembers, and Harvey goes on, but he had a special kind of hatred for Dent. You're fooling yourself, Flash would say. And also that Harvey's stuck with the losers and someday they would bring him down hard. Harvey says Flash was right, that his friends finally managed to bring him down when Bruce tells him it was all his fault. Harvey seconds him. According to Dent, Wayne gambled for real and put it all out there on the table. His friends, the city, all the chips, everything. And then he asks Bruce to get out of there. But then just before Bruce leaves, Harvey says something that looks like his first words as Two-Face. He tells Bruce that he hates him only half the time. This is a clear indication that the man has fallen to the dark side, that he embraced his duality and that of life. From now on, everything he would do will be a two-faced thing. Clearly, the fire that Bane lit killed Harvey Dent, and like a dark phoenix, Two-Face was born from it. But yeah, Harvey Dent was not the only person who was undergoing this change. Harvey is part of the fallen foursome. See, earlier I told you that Bane did not just attack Harvey, he had taken Waylon Jones much earlier. And then, in order to break Bruce Wayne, he did his thing on Oswald Cobblepot and Edward Nygma as well. Bane knew that Ozzy was always insecure about his height and that he was the weakest of the group, psychologically speaking, someone who was always on edge. So Bane and his goons broke nearly all the major bones in Ozzy's body so that when his wounds healed, he would be 2 feet shorter than his original height. Furthermore, the way they broke him also ensured that he spent the rest of his life in constant pain. In fact, later, in issue 21, Ozzy would finally get his iceberg lounge, and he would ask his henchmen to beat the crap out of Bruce if he ever set foot there. As for Edward Nygma, Bane turned him into a cybernetic version of the Riddler, complete with wires attached to his brain, which was now completely naked, without a skull. And as for Waylon Jones, we learned much earlier that Bane had turned him into Killer Croc, but I must admit, out of all the 4, Waylon was still the most humane. How do Two-Face's coin toss and hair work in the Absolute universe? Well, the art for the Absolute Two-Face looks sick, like it's hard, very hard. So this guy, after leaving the Gotham hospital, grows his hair super long. It's all white. He uses it to decide the fate of a person, along with his coin, which, by the way, is the same burning poker chip that he grabbed during his attack by Bane. The poker chip has become a symbol of that incident, a constant reminder of what happened to him and how Batman led to it. But more importantly, even if Harvey cannot look at his face to remember his ordeal, the poker chip always comes in handy. Now, as for the hair, let me begin by saying that it looks very judge-like or biblical in appearance and somewhat symbolizes his obsession with passing judgment on Gotham. But Harvey only has like 3 modes of judgment. You either live, you either die, and sometimes he just does not care and stays neutral. So, how does his hair come into the picture? How does his hair help him? Well, when Absolute Two-Face's hair covers his burned side of the face, the normal side is visible, which means that you're gonna live. When the burned side is visible, it means that you have been given a death sentence. However, when he is neutral, he ties his long hair into a bun, revealing his 2 faces. I think it's pretty slick that they used his hair to show what he is feeling, and this Harvey is turning out to be my most favorite version of the character. I'm pretty sure that when Batman faces Two-Face and the Penguin in the upcoming issues of Absolute Batman, the hero will have his work cut out for him. The blue skin, homage. Alright, so you will notice that Absolute Two-Face's burned body has blue skin, including his face, which is something that you will click with immediately if you have watched Batman the Animated Series. And once it clicks, you can't unsee it. Dent's new design relies somewhat on the animated look, or at least borrows from it to a degree. The scarred side of his face has that bright blue tone, and that's a direct callback to how BTAS handled Two-Face. Back then, they didn't go for strict realism. They went for contrast, blue skin, a stark white patch of hair, distorted eye. It looked stylized, but it stuck with you, and it had to. I mean, this decision had to be made because you were a child and your eyes needed to be attracted. Now in Absolute Batman, the same idea shows up again, but with a slightly grounded edge. It tells you the transformation isn't fully settled yet, but through those gaps, you can already see what he's becoming. The blue skin, the red eye, the sharp white streak of hair. It's all there. Anyway, what I find interesting is how this ties back to the larger situation around Bruce. Now, if you're asking why I go with the blue, specifically, I think it comes down to identity. The BTAS version embraced a look that felt unnatural, but memorable, and this comic takes the same visual language and places it into a harsher context. But hey, it's not only nostalgia, it's a smart visual shorthand too. You see that color, and you already understand who Harvey is becoming. That's what works for me here, mostly because it respects the animated legacy, but it doesn't copy it blindly. It adapts it to fit a version of Gotham where the damage lingers. By issue 17, Harvey has already vanished. Now, Absolute Batman number 17 is all about Poison Ivy and Bruce's encounter with her, but it also reveals that Harvey has left the hospital despite his injuries. Dr. Tompkins tells Bruce that Harvey's bisected head still needed at least a month to get healed properly, but when the nurses arrived in his room one morning, he was gone. You may recall something similar happening in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight, where Harvey leaves the hospital despite the pain. Oh yes, he did have a conversation with the Joker before doing so. But anyway, the point is that Harvey has now lost it completely and given in to the dark side. The man who vanishes from the hospital is not really Bruce's old friend, Harvey Dent, but it is Batman's newest enemy, Two-Face. As I said earlier, Bruce has his work cut out for him. In fact, in the same issue, Bruce visits Iceberg Lounge, but is kicked out by Ozzy's security team that warns him about setting foot in there again, telling him that if he did, they would F him up big time. However, Bruce, being Bruce, tells them that he would return the next day, and the day after that, and the day after, until Ozzy agreed to see him, but I digress. High fashion duality. Despite being a man broken on the inside out, Absolute Two-Face does not fail from flexing what he's got, you see. He still dresses like he owns the broom, and this was not really the case when Bane had not broken him down. In fact, when you look at him, the suit is the first thing that you notice. Clean, tailored, split right down the middle in black and white. And like always, there's a lack of gimmick in his suit, but a truckload of symmetry. And needless to say, that's not accidental, much like the other Harvey Dents. Even this version of Harvey doesn't lose his obsession with duality after the attack. He only refines it. I would go as far to say that he upgrades his duality through his cheek look. Even in ruin, the man commits to the bit. Now, I know that Two-Face is one of the coldest Batman villains, right? But interestingly enough, the absolute Two-Face is colder than all his other iterations, in the sense that there's not a lot of theatricality and deception here. So much so that this guy isn't the loud theatrical Two-Face from other versions. This one's in complete and absolute control, and he, as a person, is also controlled. Unlike his colleagues like the Penguin or the Riddler, the suit feels expensive and almost high fashion in how sharp it looks. You can tell this is someone who still thinks in terms of order and presentation, even if his mind is split in two. Anyway, it's this contrast that does a lot of the heavy lifting. You've got a face that's been crushed and burned, and then you've got a suit that looks like it belongs on a runway, and this very clash tells you everything without a single line of dialogue. One half of him still wants structure, control, maybe even dignity. The other half, that's where the damage resides. Now, if you're wondering whether this is new, not really. Two-Face has always been about the black and white suit, but in Absolute Batman, it feels much sharper, way more intentional, and yeah, far less theatrical. If you ask me, there's something more personal to it. But then again, that's the whole point of this version of Harvey. When everything falls apart, he still needs a system. He is a product of Darkseid Energy. Before I get into Two-Face and all the damage, you need to understand what this Darkseid Energy thing actually is, because this isn't some throwaway concept. This is pretty much the backbone of the Absolute Universe. Now, in the main DC setup, everything circles back to the metaverse, and Superman is right at the center of it, right? Hope is the idea. No matter how messy things get, the story bends back towards something better. That's what people refer to as Superman Energy, even if it's not what they always call it. But hey, Scott Snyder doesn't leave things alone like that. He is known for taking ideas and turning them upside down. So if Superman represents hope, structure, forward movement, then Darkseid Energy is the opposite. Not in a cartoonish way, but in a fundamental, almost cosmic way. It's related to Omega Energy, the same force behind Darkseid's Omega beams. And those things don't miss. More often than not, they erase, they control, they dominate. So you get the vibe, yeah? Now apply that to an entire universe. The Absolute Universe, aka Earth Alpha, is built on that energy, which means the world itself is all about struggle, of the toughest kind, if I may add, which basically means that the entire system is rigged. People don't start from a good place and fall. They start low and they get pushed further down, and then some more. And this is where the underdog angle comes in. Snyder has already said these heroes don't have the comfort or support their main universe versions had. So when they rise, it means more. Now let's bring this back to the villain. In a world shaped by Darkseid Energy, villains aren't theatrical or over the top for the sake of it. They are products of pressure. The environment pushes them there. You see it with Black Mask, who is definitely more violent than usual. You see it with this version of Joker, who isn't some chaotic clown prince of crime in the Absolute Universe, but a powerful, calculated billionaire with zero moral limit. And then you look at Two-Face. This version of Harvey Dent doesn't fall from grace by his own actions. He does not choose it and is in no way responsible for becoming evil. As I mentioned earlier, his only crime was probably being friends with Batman, and for that crime he gets broken. I think you can see clearly that there's a difference. Bane doesn't scar him in the traditional sense. He crushes his skull, burns his face, dismantles his mind step by step. That's not symbolic damage, that's systematic destruction. But the important part here is that in a normal DC story, there's always a sense that maybe things could have gone differently. Maybe Harvey could have been saved. In the Absolute universe, however, that possibility feels thin because Harvey is a product of the world he lives in. A world built on Darkseid Energy doesn't nurture balance. I mean, this is not Thanos. We're talking about who gets horny over balance. Darkseid wants to fracture everything. Imbalance does not reside in fractures. So Two-Face's duality is not really psychological anymore because his duality originates from his very environment, from the very air he breathes and the very land he walks on. He becomes Two-Face, not only because of what happened to him, but because the universe around him has always wanted it that way. You will next see Two-Face in Absolute Batman's issue number 21, where he would bring his morbid duality and his twisted sense of justice. And yeah, guys, that was all in this video. If you liked it, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. Those 2 clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these awesome videos. Stay safe and have a good one.